when you mentioned dictation, I just read an article that talks about voice recognition.
Yeah.
And I mean, definitely there is a huge progress in that just recent few years.
Yeah.
Do you, when you write your books or anything really, do you use voice recognition as a dictation as a tool, or?
Not really. I infuriate my wife by dictating emails if I'm outside, but beyond that, which is always, I don't know, it always sounds like this really pretentious thing if you're sitting on a train sort of saying, you know, "Dear Max, comma, next paragraph, how are you today, question mark." But no, for the most part, it's, I think that, I mean, it's interesting. Again, we sort of go back to the typewriter in the way that it sort of enforces certain limitations on the way that you have to kind of think about what you're writing. I think that typing is also a little bit like that. I think you can speak much faster than you can think sometimes, which I think is often why people get into trouble for things that they say, because they'll, you know, blurt something out which maybe with a bit more sort of nuancing would have been fine to say, but they kind of, you know, say it too kind of quickly. So I think the fact that when you're typing, it sort of forces you to... There's a certain sort of, I don't know, a process to it, or a sort of formality to it. It sort of dictates the speed at which you can think to an extent. So I think that if it was just sort of dictating things, then I don't know that I don't know, it would just sound...
Yeah.
So it would sound like rambling, I think. So no, I don't use it myself. But it's an incredible tool, and I mean, again, a lot of the time I'll write about sort of accessibility technologies, you know, for people who with sort of varying disabilities and things. And I mean, things like dictation have obviously been amazingly transformative. I was writing recently about a new image recognition gadget which is able to turn sign language into written text, which is, again, you know, just the ability to kind of, you know, move between these different sort of, I suppose, communicative mediums is quite amazing now.
Mm-hmm. Okay, then picking up on that, in terms of, you know, like, to me, there are three main ways to, you know, deliver whatever the message you want to deliver. There is video, right?
Sure.
It's really, really hot now, and I mean, you know, historically there were films, they were structured like this. Now there is all kinds of different, you know, formats. There is, you know, super long films.
Yeah.
There is super short videos, and there are things in between and stuff like that. So there is video.
Yeah.
There is audio, which is, you know, what I'm doing, what we're doing now.
Sure. And interestingly, I mean, video, it's funny because nowadays, you know, people increasingly don't watch films because they watch TV shows, and then online, you know, sort of the most popular videos are things which are kind of, you know, 3-minute videos on YouTube, or sort of short form videos on YouTube. But with audio, it's kind of gone the other way, hasn't it? I mean, often I'll go and speak on, speak on a topic on the radio, and they'll try and cover, you know, artificial intelligence in 3 minutes. And then I love the fact that the podcast has almost done the sort of the inverse of video, in the sense that now you'll happily sit down and listen to, you know, often like a 2-hour podcast with people sort of really delving into something in detail. So I always think that's kind of interesting.
4 hours about, like...
Oh, sure. Yeah, no, absolutely.
And also it's interesting how some of those come out like once in a month.
And
it's like this super long excurse into, like, you know, the 30-year war or something like that. And obviously for that target audience, that's like, they're super thrilled.
Yes.
Do you think it's connected in any way with the attention spans? There is a bunch of evidence for and against it, really, because I mean, the films are getting longer. Right? As you said, people are happy to listen to podcasts. Also because they can do other things at the same time.
Yes.
But yet people are talking about short attention spans and how we can't really stay focused for long.
Yeah. I mean, I think with film it's slightly different, because I think, yes, films are getting longer. I think there are a few reasons for that, though. I think that one of them is probably the fact that a lot of the time people will now watch things at home, whereas, you know, previously, I mean, we've only had home video for, 30 years or something. So previously it had to be a whole kind of cinema experience. So if you wanted to make it longer, you had to, I mean, often if you see like a Cecil B. DeMille movie from the 1950s, they'll have kind of an intermission in the middle of it. But for the most part, these were experiences that had to be kind of enjoyed in one sitting. Mm-hmm. Whereas now you can have, an extended cut of one of the Lord of the Rings films, which lasts, 4.5 hours or something.
That's my favorite.
Because people can sit down and you can watch it in sections if you kind of want to do that. But also, I think that the economics of multiplexes has sort of changed the way that, I suppose kind of the length of films, because previously there was far more of a sort of financial motive in sort of having something that would last 90 minutes and then you'd be able to kind of get the next audience in. Whereas if you've got sort of 20 screens playing the latest movie or, then it kind of changes that sort of imperative. But in terms of shortening attention spans, I think in some ways it's always difficult, isn't it, with these subjects, because you kind of think that every generation always looks at the next generation and sort of says, things were different back in our day. We could pay attention for much longer. Look at these young people with their Snapchats and everything. And so I think part of it is probably that same kind of impetus, that it's just kind of older people often looking at new technologies and seeing them as unnecessarily reductive. I think in some ways there are certainly kind of dangers to, something like the 140 character limit on Twitter. I know that they've now lifted that, but for a while, on the one hand, it was this amazing art form to be able to kind of compress a complex idea into 140 characters. At the same time, there are often dangers in taking complex ideas and trying to distill them into that sort of same thing. So I think that there's a push now, because people have access to so much content. There are so many ways that you can spend your time. There's kind of a push to maybe shorten the length of things so that people can fit these things into busier and busier lives. But I don't know whether, and in some ways I suppose the internet has possibly changed the way that we think about certain topics. I know that there was that book, The Shallows, which I think came out about 15 years ago, talking about the way that the hyperlinked nature of the web has kind of changed our concentration spans. But I can see kind of pros and cons in a lot of these cases.